Welcome to The Right Atmosphere, podcast for writers, brought to you by Atmosphere Press, the only publisher that puts rewarding and meaningful author experiences above all else. I'm your host, Hayla Alawi. On this episode, we're going to be talking about creating and writing dynamic characters with our guest, Joe Sparks. Joe has interviewed NFL stars and third-string players, taken and taught writing and screenwriting classes, won awards, and gotten rejected. He is, after all, a writer. He's written commercials, interviewed school principals and Olympic gold medalists, staffed a local children's television show, and taught screenwriting at the film school at SCC. Her body of work includes scripts for children's live action and animated television programs, a direct-to-video children's DVD, commercial work for corporate clients, a feature writer on Resume.com, and writing for the Arizona Sports Fans Network. She's the author of the book Feedback: How to Give It, How to Get It. Her original script, Frank Retrieval, won the 2012 K. Snow Award for Best Screenplay. Her fantasy series, The Legend of the Gamesman, has garnered 3 Bragg medallions and a 2015 Silver Ippy Award for ebook in juvenile/YA fiction. And recently moved to the UK, Joe can now be found contemplating airing cupboards and phone boxes stuffed with used books. Thank you so much for joining me, Joe.
Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity. It's nice to talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially, clearly you have this expertise writing across several different genres. And, for writers in many genres, no matter what background they're coming from, you could say, it's to some writers, the most critical part of their story is the characters, because pretty much all the time they are the vehicle of the storytelling. So it's no surprise that the process of writing characters can feel overwhelming, maybe frustrating. I find it thrilling to bring those characters convincingly to life. So that's where your 360 view of characters comes in. Can you tell us a little bit more about your 360 view of characters?
Oh, yeah. The way I look at a story is it's like a roller coaster, and that's a story, a fiction novel, or a script, or whatever you're talking about. And the roller coaster part, you've got the track, which is where you're going, and that's your scenes, your settings, your outline, however you do it. But the other important part is that car you get into to take the ride. And what you said about it being a vehicle is exactly it. You want a car that makes the audience want to ride along. If you have a dead character, a dull, flat, two-dimensional character, you lose people pretty quick because there's nothing to really latch on to. If you get to a point where you really know your characters, and it's not just the one, the more of the characters that you know and understand, the better a story you can tell. And there is a point, you can hit a point where you suddenly find yourself putting these characters in a situation. And then rather than trying really hard to write or make them do something, you just relax and take dictation because they'll take control. And what I found for me is when I hit that, which isn't all the time, but when I hit that, they take control and it goes in directions that I would have never thought of. But it goes in those directions because that's how those people respond. A good example, a script once that I was doing, and this sounds really advanced. It wasn't. I've never had anything made on movies. Don't think I have. But I had this director one time, and he wanted me to take the characters into the bedroom and show some skin. He wanted a obligatory romantic sex kind of scene. But the characters, I was trying to do everything he wanted because you do what the director tells you. But the two characters wouldn't do it. They ended up having this huge fight, and it actually turned out so much better because if you can picture them, she's basically naked except for a sheet, and he's yelling at her, which makes her like about 10 times more vulnerable. And it just went so well. But kind of shocked me because it wasn't supposed to go that way. And I really worried what the director would say. He loved it. He actually really liked it a lot. But it was because, in some ways, you can't even take credit for it. It's just what happens. So the question is, how do you get to that point? How do you get to know your characters? Different people have different ways. They like to talk about defining their appearance, defining their background, defining their foreground to me, which is where they want to go, where they'd like to head for the future. But the best way is to find for yourself what defines people. I've found just for me that the quickest path, if you will, is to understand how this character perceives the other characters. Okay, so you actually plant yourself in their head, and that 360 view is looking everywhere. You want to not just spend a minute figuring it out, you want to explore, get in that head and actually explore the character. If they're about to meet a woman on a train and you're going to have this big romance, why are they on the train? And how do they first perceive the woman? If they're going to fall in love instantly and live happily ever after, it's a very boring story. You need that conflict, which is in basically life, really. It's very rare that two people meet and everything goes great. And usually, when it does, it turns out one of them's a serial killer or something. You need to understand what this person is going to do, how they're going to react. What are their foibles? Because we all have foibles. Maybe one of them's actually scared to be on the train, or maybe the other is allergic to peanuts and unknowingly just ate a peanut. There's a zillion little things that can be in there. And the more you understand that character, the better you'll be prepared to let them take over the work and you just record what's going on.
Yeah, so it kind of sounds like you have this approach of asking yourself questions and seeing what naturally fits based on the character that you've created. Do you have any exercises or particular questions that you like to ask yourself when you're building a character?
I sure do. Stepping back to that idea of understanding how the character feels about all the other characters in the book. And it's all of them, not just, a romantic interest. A waiter's coming over. How does he react to the waiter? Is it a young guy? What's in the waiter's life? What's going on with him? Is he just dropping stuff? Is he unhappy? Is he having a problem with his girlfriend? The guy who's sitting at the table, is he getting ready to propose? Is he getting interrupted by the waiter? Maybe the waiter looks like his brother and it's making him even more uncomfortable. How does the girl or the woman feel about what's going on? Maybe she's trying to get away from the guy at the table who's buying her dinner because she's got a phone call coming in from an old boyfriend that she's hoping something great will happen. So here he is trying to establish this relationship, but she doesn't even like him that much. She wants to get beyond him to the next thing for the evening. Those create all on their own conflicts, but they're real conflicts. When to me, if I try and make the characters do what I want, okay, now I need them to go home and the car to have a flat tire, it feels like I'm too heavy handed on the driving, on the steering wheel. And you're trying to force things and it doesn't come out quite as natural. When you've got those characters down in your head and you understand what he's feeling and how he's reacting to every little thing. The waiter just spilled a little bit of soup on his sleeve. He hates that. He spent hours getting immaculate for this date, and now he's already got a spot of soup on his sleeve. He's furious. In the meantime, she could care less about that. In fact, maybe she knew the waiter because she's been at the restaurant many times. So when he starts getting angry at the waiter, how is she going to react? It's like, wait a minute, you can't do that. He's a kid. What are you doing? So
Right.
you find all these things start to happen that I never thought about, I never planned for. They just occur, but they occur because I put two people or three people in a situation. And now I'm just looking at what's happening.
Yeah. So it's kind of like that's not exactly working backwards, I suppose, but I hear often from writers that the way that character creation plays out for them is they kind of set these parameters like, oh, this character is going to have XYZ traits, and these ones are physical and these ones are emotional or mental. And then from there, they kind of build a situation out of those parameters. But I think that can kind of lead to a little too much rigidity sometimes. I think it can work. And in other cases, if you're inventing someone, person isn't perfect. They have all these different kind of quirks and not necessarily flaws. I mean, people do have flaws, of course, but any kind of these traits. So I like this kind of more organic, put them in a situation and just see what happens. So as you're doing that, have you ever, especially with a longer work, have you ever come across a situation where maybe different ways that you imagine a character reacts to different situations are at odds with each other? Or does that maybe just make the character more real? What are your thoughts on that?
If you relax and allow it to happen, you can have a lot of fun, but it can sometimes take you in a direction that you never. I had one once. I was doing this story for somebody else, and it was a guy and he'd been really good friends with this girl, but they were just friends. She knew him forever. She actually had a bit of a crush on him. He had married her best friend. And as things worked out, he was actually, you could call him a serial killer, but he wasn't. He'd killed two people because he wanted to kill his wife. So he was trying to make it look like it was a serial killer kind of thing. Well, it gets to that point where they're chasing he's chasing her through the house, and he has to kill her because she knows about him murdering the other two. But as I'm recording it, as he's chasing her and she's going up the stairs and she falls and he kind of lands on top of her. And he just looked at her and said, "Why did we never make love?" And I mean, I almost dropped my pen. I was just stunned. And she was stunned, but it came out naturally because he was that type of guy. He didn't, to him, sex was just, it was kind of like a recreation. And he's just kind of like, yeah, dude, we should have done that at some point. And of course, she's freaking out. I mean, you can imagine how you would freak out. I freaked out at it. But I mean, who would ever dream of that, of somebody propositioning you in the middle of strangling you kind of thing? So it's, if you allow yourself to just flow with it, write it down, and then, thank goodness we've got computers these days. You can go back and work on it later, like, holy crap, what does that mean? How do I even want to use it? Maybe I need to do something different. But sometimes you can discover some wonderful gems that just make it a wonderful story. You just have to be open.
Yeah, which I think is, in a way, it's a challenging thing to ask writers, relax into it a bit. But I think that's why it's so important. And I love how you talk about, I mean, a lot of authors, a lot of writers talk about their characters and how they really feel like they're real. But I love how you talk about this as if it literally happened, and it was literally happening as you were writing it, so to speak. So I think that's just a testament to the way that this kind of approach to character development works. Before we say goodbye to our guest, I'm happy to say that this podcast is brought to you by Manuscript Makers, a new subscription service from Atmosphere Press. Manuscript Makers exists to empower writers to do the one thing that matters most: finish the book. We're here to help you hit the page, stay on track, and make real progress chapter after chapter. At $99 a month, members gain access to a supportive, purpose-driven environment that provides just enough structure to stay focused without overwhelming their creative flow. Members receive monthly group classes, live group discussions, curated writing prompts and exercises, and exclusive access to an online writing community. We believe in small steps, shared accountability, and showing up, even when it's hard. Whether you're stuck in the middle or so close to the end, we're here to help you finish. Visit atmospherepress.com to learn more about manuscript makers and sign up now so we can help you get those pages done. And Joe, I also want to ask, where should our listeners go to learn more about you and all that you're doing?
Probably my website might be best, but I'll admit I'm one of those people who doesn't always keep everything up to date. I've just finished, in fact, today, I just finished the first rough draft of my new novel, which I've already sent a contact to my editor, and it takes a bit to get it ready. But I was using that for this one in particular, and it's a very different, in fact, I'm not even sure what genre I'm going to have to put it in. It's called The Sand Wraith, and it'll probably be out in about 6 months, I guess. We'll see.
All right,
But
something
my
exciting.
website is joesparks.com.
Perfect. So definitely something to look out for on the horizon. For now, thank you again, and thanks to all the listeners for tuning in. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Right Atmosphere, the Advice for Writers podcast. If you liked what you heard, please leave a review and share this podcast with the writers in your life. And if you're ready to take the next step in your publication journey, visit atmospherepress.com to submit your manuscript for publication consideration or to learn more about writing and what it is that we do. I'm Hala. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next episode.